Good evening. Thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar, Protecting the Capitol, with Chief of the U.S. Capitol Police, Tom Manger. I am Ron Halber, the Executive Director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Before we begin, you should know that this program is being recorded. Also, if you want to access closed captioning, please click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. The JCRC serves as the public affairs and community relations arm of the Greater Washington area's Jewish community. We represent the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington and more than 100 organizations, synagogues, and schools to advocate for the needs and values of the Jewish community and for the well-being of everyone in the region, including the most vulnerable. The JCRC is focused on government relations, advocating for Israel, combating anti-Semitism, strengthening ties with other communities, working in our region's schools, Holocaust education and commemoration, and security. After I introduce our guest and Chief Manger offers some remarks, we will take questions, so please put them in the Q&A module and I will present them. Chief Manger was sworn in as Chief of Police on July 23, 2021. He has served 42 years in the policing profession, including more than 2 decades as Chief of Police for 2 of the largest police agencies in the National Capital Region. Most recently, he was Chief of Police in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live, from 2004 to 2019. He also served as Police Chief in Fairfax County, Virginia, from 1998 to 2004. His leadership in regional law enforcement initiatives is extensive. During his career as a Police Chief in Montgomery County, Manger received several awards, including the 2007 Law Enforcement Award from the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, the 2016 Gurwitz Institute Service Award from the ADL, and the 2018 FBI National Executive Institute Associates Penrith Award. In 2018, Washingtonian Magazine named Manger as one of the Washingtonians of the Year, which is a big honor in our community in this region. He also serves on the Cardinal's Child Safety Advisory Board for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. Elected by his peers to national leadership positions, Manger served from 2014 to 2018 as president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association, and from 2013 to 2017 as vice president of the Police Executive Research Forum. Chief, thank you for joining us. And if you want to take a few minutes to just speak to us, and then we will follow up with questions. But most importantly, thank you for taking your time at the end of a very long and busy day to join us tonight.
Thank you, Ron, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I wish we could do this in person. I always enjoy meeting with community members. You know, one of the biggest differences between the job as Chief of Police at the U.S. Capitol and my other jobs that I've had is that I was the Chief of Police Department serving over 1 million people, and so easily 2, 3, 4 nights a week, I was out talking to community members at different meetings, some of them because of crime problems, some, just talking about crime and safety in their particular neighborhood. And I don't get a chance to do that as much with the Capitol Police. My community is the 535 members of Congress, and we got probably about 20 to 30,000 people who work on Capitol Hill. That's my community, and I don't get a chance to meet with them as much, mostly because of COVID. But so I am very happy to be here and talk to folks tonight. So I thought I'd start with just some background information. And if you all remember taking civics, back when you were in high school, this will be your civics lesson. So the Capitol Police were formed in 1828, and they were formed and had 3 missions. One was to protect Congress, 2 to protect the U.S. Capitol, and the 3rd was to protect the legislative process. And if you all remember from your civics class, there's 3 branches of government. There's the executive branch. That would be in the federal government, that's the president. The judicial branch, that would be the Supreme Court. And then there's the legislative branch, and that's who I work for now. And I will tell you that working working in a police department that serves the legislative branch is very different than the jobs that I've held previously. So It's a unique job. We're the only police department in this country that protects our U.S. Capitol and all of the members of Congress. So it's a very unique position, and one that is a big challenge, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But it's one that I'm honored to serve. And I actually am here at the Capitol because of January 6th. We all, I think many of us can recall vividly. I know I was in my home, and I heard this commotion on the TV. I had the TV on in the background, and I started watching, and it was live from the Capitol, and it showed our Capitol being attacked, and it was just horrific to me. As a police officer, as a former police chief at the time, I was watching officers being assaulted. I was watching the beautiful Capitol, one of the most wonderful institutions in our country, being attacked. And I remember thinking, I wish that there was something I could do to help. In fact, I wanted to just jump in my car and go down there to get in the fray. And so it wasn't too much, it was probably a month or two later that I got a call from someone who said that they were doing the police chief search for the new police chief at the U.S. Capitol. And they reached out to me and said, and asked me if I'd be interested. And I told them to let me think about it. And then they said, well, with your experience, with the amount of time you've worked in the Washington, D.C. area, you know the people, you know the job, your country needs you. And as corny as that sounds, that resonated with me. And so I'm proud again to serve my country in this role. And it's quite a challenge. So let me talk a little bit about what protecting the U.S. Capitol involves. First, when I tell people that I have over 2,000 police officers, they're always surprised. They say, 2,000 police officers? I mean, you're just guarding one building. Why do you need 2,000 officers? Well, have learned quite a bit since I took this job. First of all, we protect not only the United States Capitol, but we protect all of the congressional office buildings, the Library of Congress, and in fact, 50 square blocks on Capitol Hill is part of our jurisdiction. So, and it's a fairly good size area, and so that's one of the reasons that we have so many police officers. Another reason is that we actually do provide 24/7 protection to the congressional leadership, and that is that they have. If you think about this, the way the Secret Service protects the president, we have agents in the Capitol Police who protect both the majority and the minority leadership. Again, the civics lesson here. Remember, who's third in line in succession to the president? Of course, you have the president, then the vice president's next in line. Next is the majority speaker of the House. So certainly providing the speaker with 24/7 protection makes sense. The president pro tem, by the way, that is the senior person in the Senate. The president pro tem of the Senate is the fourth person in line for the presidency. So all of those folks have 24/7 protection details, plus the rest of the congressional leadership positions. So that's another couple hundred employees that I have with that responsibility. So we are the first responders for the entire campus. We also, by the way, I think I mentioned we protect the Library of Congress as well, the Botanical Gardens. And one of the things that I've learned is that while the Supreme Court have their own security and their own police, the Supreme Court has very little property around the court itself. So every time there's a demonstration at the Supreme Court, they actually demonstrate typically on U.S. Capitol property. So when we had, as many of you are aware, there were some cases recently some to do with vaccine mandates, some to do with Roe versus Wade. And of course, these kinds of cases get a lot of attention and bring people who are passionate about both sides of an issue. And so when 10 or 20,000 people show up to protest at the Supreme Court, that is the U.S. Capitol Police issue, because they're on our property and we've got to make sure that they are able to exercise their First Amendment rights and their right to protest, but keep things safe and ensure that that nobody crosses the line in terms of their behavior. So there's plenty to keep us busy. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was, we live in a country today that is, I think, divided in many ways politically. I think you could look at it as the haves and the have-nots. There's racial divide, there's ethnic divide, and I think that those divisions are more pronounced, I think, than they have been in years past. And the civil discourse that people typically used to have. I mean, if Ron and I were to disagree on something, we could have a civil conversation and have disagreements and remain friends and have a discussion about an issue without becoming enemies, so to speak, and without having some vitriol. Well, that's harder and harder to find, I think, in our nation today. And not that this, we won't go down that rabbit hole, but I will tell you that it's very pronounced on Capitol Hill. And so we have the responsibility for investigating threats against the members of Congress. And back in, I think about 5 years ago, we had, I think it was around 2,000 or so threats against Congress members in, I think it was 2017. And then it gradually continued to get more and more complaints each year. In 2021, we had over 9,000 complaints against the members of Congress. And these complaints range anywhere from someone saying, I'm going to kill Senator so-and-so, or, and just horrid. Some of these things are just vile and vulgar things that people will say. And they come in via email, they come in by telephone, people mail letters, any number of ways that these complaints get to us. And some of them, obviously, if you say I'm going to kill so-and-so, that's a criminal threat, and we investigate that as a crime. But we even have things like, we had a case where someone sent in a photo of a child walking a dog and said, and sent it to a particular representative, and they said, hey, I saw your child walking your dog yesterday. Cute dog. Now, is that a crime to tell someone their dog is cute? But how concerning would that be, that you'd get an email from some anonymous source saying, that they took a picture of your child walking a dog? And clearly that is meant to intimidate someone. And so when we, and we get cases like that, that even if it may not be a crime, it's enough concern to us that we follow up with an investigation. And we work with the U.S. when we are able to identify someone who has crossed the line and made a criminal threat. We work with the U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute those cases. But just the fact that we have that sheer number of cases, 9,000. I mean, you're talking about a dozen or more cases every day of the year that we have to follow up on, and so there's no shortage and it's both sides of the aisle. I mean, it's not just and yes, it's a lot. The leadership gets their share, but it's really spread across. In fact, there's very few senators and House members that don't have a complaint at some point during their tenures. So, but we spend a lot of time working on that issue. January 6th was a very bad time for the U.S. Capitol Police Department. The police chief, who was on January 6th, actually on January 7th, he resigned. He was, and there's a lot of blame to go around about why January 6th happened. But when you're the chief of police, you're responsible. And so they asked for his resignation. Both the House Sergeant at Arms and the Senate Sergeant of Arms both resigned as well. And in fact, quite a few people left the police department shortly after January 6th. So when I took over, I had a couple of advantages and a couple of disadvantages. One, the disadvantages were the morale in the department was just so low, it was awful. There were deficiencies that had been identified about why I say deficiencies. I mean, they were literally failures within the department that resulted in many police officers being hurt. You had one officer who was killed the next or died the next day due to a stroke, which I have no doubt in my mind was caused by the assaults that he took on January 6th. We had a couple of officers commit suicide, but we had hundreds of officers that were injured. So I get to this department, and there are the challenges are many, and they are very significant. And so in the time I've been there and with the folks with the leadership of the department that remained, we've been able to significantly address many of the problems, whether it was the intelligence failure, the operational planning failure. We had officers that were fighting and didn't have the proper equipment that they should have had the protective equipment, helmets, vests, shields, things that they could have protected themselves that they didn't have. The biggest failures we have addressed, and I'm very happy to say that I can say confidently, if we had a large violent demonstration tomorrow, we would be much better prepared, and it would be a different result than we had on January 6th. And mind you, we have demonstrations every day on the Capitol. And I think one of the reasons that I believe one of the reasons that January 6th occurred was because the U.S. Capitol Police handle demonstrations every day. And some are big, some are small, but we handle them every day. And I think that there may have been some complacency with regard to, the protest on January 6th. And it resulted in that they didn't plan ahead enough, that they didn't get the resources that they needed. And again, those things have been largely fixed. One of the advantages I had was the fact that the Inspector General and several other committees put together reports about January 6th and listed recommendations for improvement. So when I got there, there were 103 recommendations about what needed to be done to improve the issues that resulted in January 6th. And so I prioritized that list, and it's been a real help, to be able to say, okay, let's tick this one off. We got this one done. And slowly but surely, we're getting those recommendations implemented. Some of them are going to take longer time because I need to get, something in a budget, and, that the budget process typically takes a year or more. But many of them we've been able to implement, and so we've made significant improvements. Still a lot of work to be done. Make no mistake about that. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I want to mention two more things, and then we can open it up to questions. We've got the State of the Union address coming up and next month. And we're responsible, and of course we'll be working with the Secret Service, but we're responsible for the safety and security of every member of Congress and the President of the United States and everybody else who's going to come to the State of the Union address, Supreme Court justices, other government officials. And that's a big responsibility. We've already started the planning for that, but that's a big responsibility, and certainly will test our ability to put a big operational plan together. But again, I'm confident in my folks. I'm confident with the things that we put into place. But our challenges continue every day. It's something new. And then I'll finish with a story that I think many of us are following or have noticed, and that's the protests that are going on in Canada right now. And I think they're anti-vaccine or vaccine mandate protests. And you have hundreds, if not close to 1,000 truckers who are just creating gridlock in the city of Ottawa. And I think that we can expect that protests like that are going to happen in our country as well. There's already some discussion, and in fact, I read in the newspaper that they're talking about starting in California and just going east and finishing up in Washington, D.C. And I'm praying that that maybe with that with the Omicron variant, seems to be perhaps getting a little bit better. That maybe the vaccine mandates or mask mandates won't be as big an issue in our country, and maybe we won't have problems. But these are the kinds of things that will keep me awake at night, because we've got to be prepared if we get 500 trucks that show up at the U.S. Capitol to disrupt the government, again, disrupt the legislative process, because we're there to protect that too. We need to make sure that Congress can do its job, and so we've got to protect the members, the building, and the process. And so again, these are the kinds of challenges that make this job interesting and keep me on my toes. That's for sure. So I'll stop there. I mean, I could go on and on about some things. And Ron, I know we want to get to questions, but let me just tell you how lucky I am. I think it was about the first week or so, maybe it was a week and a half, when I started the job. We had a gentleman pull up in his truck right in front of the Supreme Court and stop. And he just parked his car right in front of the Supreme Court. Well, there's no parking on that stretch of road there. You can't stop on that road. And when an officer approached him to tell him that he had to move along, he said, "I have a bomb, I'm not moving." And so we had someone who claimed that he had a bomb parked in front of the Supreme Court, again, on our property. So it was our case. And I thought to myself, I thought maybe I'd have maybe a couple of weeks that I could get settled in this job before we had our first crisis. Well, my folks did a magnificent job, and we were able to took a few hours, and we were able to get the gentleman into custody. I'll tell you one quick story, and then I really will turn it back to you, Ron. One of the strategies we had for this individual, because we wanted to communicate with him, and since he had a bomb, the officers, gave him some distance.
So did he end up having an explosive? He actually had an explosive?
I'll get to that. But the answer is yes. So we want to negotiate with him, right? So one of the strategies you have is you try and get a phone, and we call it a throw phone, because sometimes you throw it through a window, sometimes you throw it, but you're trying to throw it to somebody that you want to talk to, and you don't want to get that close to them. Well, we had a robot, and we had a robot. It was around the corner. It was about a block away, and so we put the phone in the robot's hand, and we were going to let the robot travel down and basically hand the phone to the guy. We could remotely control the robot. Well, I thought this was a good plan, keeps everybody safe. Well, what I didn't know is this particular robot, if it went 1 mile an hour, that was, I mean, it barely moved. And honestly, Pete, it took us nearly an hour just to get that robot one block. And this is the funny part. The robot's going up to the guy. We raise it up like this. The guy grabs the phone. He throws it, as far as he can on the sidewalk. And I'm thinking, well, that, all that, and he just grabs the phone and he throws it. He's not going to talk to us anyway. So anyway, we got a different strategy. We ended up taking him out of the car. He did have, it wasn't a bomb per se, but he had explosive material that is used to make bombs in his vehicle. And he has since been charged and I think convicted. So I think he's in jail right now. But again, I would have liked to have had maybe just a couple of weeks in the job before I, had my first crisis. But that one turned out okay. Nobody got hurt, and so it turned out okay. So Ron, I'll turn it over to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I think anybody, as somebody who's known you for 2 decades, as a friend and as a colleague and as working with you in the community, I just want to say I think we're very extraordinarily lucky to have a person of your qualifications, position, dedication in the position where you are right now.
You.
So you mentioned a couple things that you cover a 50 square block area, got 9,000 threats, you've got 20,000 people who work there, and you've got daily protests. How is 2,000 police officers enough to meet that challenge?
Well, so I would tell you that sometimes it's not. And remember, this is 24/7 that we're on duty. So it's not, people say, oh, well, like we have 2,000 people working every day. Well, we don't. Officers have to have their days off. They're in training and, all these sorts of things. So it's, it has grown, but our responsibilities have grown as well. And the request for our assistance has grown. I mean, when a member of Congress contacts me and says, hey, can you help me out with, I'm having a town hall meeting that I'm going to speak, I'm going to speak at a town hall meeting. Can you help me with any security advice or whatever? We do all that. We're providing service, a number of different, any safety or security service that a member requests, we try and accommodate. And so there's a lot of things that we are involved with, I think, that are fairly invisible to the public, but we need every single one of those bodies, that's for sure.
And do you hope to get more?
Yeah, we because we had the problems that we did on January 6th, I think everybody wants to have better contingency plans if something were to pop up quickly, so that we had a better ability to respond with our own resources. And I have to say this, that the Metropolitan Washington DC Police, the MPD, they are the best partner in the world. Robert Conti is the chief. Anybody that lives in the DC area knows what a great chief Chief Conti is. He and I talk often. He is always there to help us. And so we have great partners, but sometimes you just want to be able to have what you need on the campus ready.
Right. Do you have a particular number of how many police officers in mind it would take to make you to operate at the capacity that you would like?
If we were at full capacity, which we're not, if we were at full staffing, I'd still probably want 200, 250 more.
About 10 to 15, 10% more or so.
Yeah.
Right. You said during your remarks that some changes have been instituted. What changes that you're able to discuss with the public have been instituted? You mentioned this long list of recommendations. What things that you can speak about have you implemented, and what remains to be done that is still awaiting?
So, the three biggest areas, as I mentioned before, were intelligence failures, operational planning failures, and equipment failures. We have ordered the equipment that we need for all of our officers. It's on the way. I think I was told today, in fact, that we think by the end of February, we're going to be able to start handing it out to the officers so that they'll have new equipment and complete set of equipment, everything that they need in terms of protection. And So so we've got that in queue, and that should be done hopefully in the next month or so. For the intelligence issue, we just needed to have a better operation, and we couldn't be just consumers of intelligence. That is that, we have folks that, are dependent on the FBI and Homeland Security to provide us with, what they're hearing, about what's going on, or, give us information about what they're hearing about a particular event. I mean, they're good at that. They're very good at that. The FBI and Homeland Security are very dependable, very good. But we really needed to be, we couldn't just be passive consumers. We needed to have our own analysts. We needed to have, and do a better job at sharing the information that we had with the people that were making the operational decisions. Now, this sounds like common sense, but in fact, we weren't doing a very good job of that. And so as we prepare for an event and we're getting intelligence information, we're using that to inform our operational planning. So
is the Capitol Police developing their own, developing a more robust intelligence operation? Is that
absolutely, yes. And we're not, look, we're not taking over what the FBI or Homeland Security does, but we're putting things in place that we didn't have before, that we absolutely need to have a better intelligence operation. And this has allowed us to do a better job at operational planning. We made a really smart move. We hired a gentleman who did his career with Secret Service and was the person who ran the papal visit. He ran inaugurations and just big events for the Secret Service. And so he came in and built us a template that we can use for a big event, a small event, but built us a template, said, here's how you plan for an event. And I'm telling you, it's made a world of difference. And so we've got, not only do we have a better plan, but we have given people responsibilities so that plan is implemented with everyone knowing what everyone else is doing. And this was a problem before, and I think it was a problem on January 6th, where you had, one person had in charge of one responsibility, and somebody who was working 30 feet away had no idea what this person was doing. We have now created a system where everybody knows what everybody else is doing, and so there's much better coordination. Again, it sounds like common sense, but we weren't doing as good a job of that as we should have.
How are the police doing 1 year after the violence? Their mental health, their physical wounds, their morale. And is there anything that the public can do, whether we live like some of us here in Washington within 20 miles of the Capitol, or around the country? So how are the police doing, and how can the public show support?
Ron, that's such a great question. We had, I mentioned earlier, we had a couple hundred officers that were assaulted and were injured. I had a lot more officers that were injured, but there was nothing you could see on them physically. And the resources that we had to help officers that were going through a difficult time emotionally, mentally, were deficient. We just didn't have what we needed. And I applaud the U.S. Congress. That was one of the first things that they did, is said, we're going to give you funding so that you can expand your health and wellness and resiliency resources for your officers. And so we have hired a number of people that are employee assistance type counselors, but we've also hired folks that are trained in dealing with folks that have gone through some sort of trauma. And when you talk about anybody's mental health, you can have the daily stress of just your life, your job. All of us have that kind of daily stress, and some of us deal with it better than others. Sometimes that stress impacts you more than other times. And that's one thing. But the other thing is going through a traumatic incident, going through having something occur that creates that trauma. That's a different sort of help that person needs versus the one that's just dealing with the daily stress. We have programs for both of those kinds of needs for our officers. So we've put a lot into place. We're still growing it. But
our offices coming forward, Chief, and utilizing these services.
I'm telling you, Ron, you're hitting all the nails on the head. Some are not. And I go out and talk at roll calls and remind people, look, we have these services. They are confidential. You don't have to worry about anybody knowing what you're doing. And not only are they for you, but if you want to involve your family, you can do that. So I'm trying to make these folks understand that there's no downside to doing it. But police officers are notoriously, tough guys and gals. It's like, I don't need any help. I can handle this myself. Trying to make sure that they understand that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Is vitally important. And so that's what we're trying to do. We are getting more participation. I've gotten my the FOP, the union for Capitol Police Officers. The president of the union and I are really working together to ensure that the officers take advantage of these programs. So we're making progress there. But yeah, it's still, there's a lot of folks that just are resistant just because, it's just not in their personality to ask for help.
Right. And I'm thinking, we're only 13 months from what happened, and how it takes a while for all these, if you're going to implement plans and you want to do it in a systemic way and you want to do it in a systematic way, you have to roll it out. You can't just do all these changes overnight if you want it to become permanent. And I'm wondering, do you have any stories of any officers who have come up to you and said, I really appreciate your leadership, Chief, or I really appreciate your providing these services? Like, have you any personal stories from the front lines that really touched you, that made you realize what some of these officers went through?
Oh, gosh, yeah. One of the things I do when police headquarters, Capitol Police Headquarters, is actually a block from a couple of the Senate office buildings. So I've got to walk a block to get to the first Congressional office building. Then I got to walk 2 more blocks to actually get to the Capitol. Well, I love walking. First of all, these are beautiful buildings, but I love walking because I stop and talk to my cops every time while I'm doing this. And I go up and I say, and when I first got there, especially, I would ask them, I said, how did January 6th impact you? Were you here? What happened? What were you doing? And of course, I got all kinds of stories and just amazing stories of courage, of compassion, strength, resolve. I talked to some cops, who would get very emotional when they, would tell me about their experience. So it really helped me to understand what these men and women went through. And I very quickly, got a message out. And this is when I first started, that I said, the narrative from the media, primarily the media, is that the Capitol Police failed on January 6th. And I said, I just want to tell you that, I said, here's the way I see it. The department did fail you. I mean, and I could tick off the things, where the department, had deficiencies. I said, but the men and women of the Capitol Police did not fail. They fought valiantly for hours. For hours, they fought valiantly. And in fact, when you look at it, not one member of Congress was hurt or injured in any way. Not one member of Congress was hurt. And Congress was able to come back and complete their responsibility later that day and into the next morning. So we were able to complete the legislative process, and not one member was hurt. So I said, you all prevailed. You all did your job. It was the department that let you down. And so that's been my message to them, because I do think that the men and women who are out there on the front line displayed amazing courage, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever seen a police department have to do. I mean, I could tell you stories about when I got into some fights, and when even some really difficult situations where people were hurt, killed, but none of them lasted 4 or 5 hours. And I mean, that's I just have amazing respect for all these men and women.
One person just asked and said, can you call up the DC National Guard if needed? And I know that's not under your command, but let me expand that to say, what kind of if you do find yourself, God forbid, in another sort of situation where it requires beyond the resources that are available to you, who do you call besides the DC police? Like, who is available to be deployed immediately? Because one of the things that we found out was the hesitancy of the presidency at the time to go ahead and deploy the National Guard to come and provide protection. What kind of resources do you have available right away that you don't have to wait for anybody and who will come and help the Capitol Police if needed?
So the person that came up with that question is very insightful, because Congress actually changed the law and said that I do have.
Oh, you do?
The Capitol Police Chief has the authority to declare an emergency and call out the National Guard. So the things that created the delay on January 6th, that's been eliminated. I do actually have the authority to call out the Guard. Now, that's not my first call. If I'm calling out the National Guard, that's pretty drastic. It's great that they're available, and we have a good partnership with them. But what I've done, and this is, I guess, as a result of my experience over the last 20 plus years, is that I call Montgomery County Police, Prince George's County, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, all of our neighboring agencies. I've called them and said, can you send 50 or 100 of your trained civil disturbance unit police officers? These are folks that have been trained to deal with demonstrations and violent demonstrations. They come equipped, trained, and each one sends me what we call a platoon, and 50 to 100 officers. And with a couple of phone calls, I've got 500 extra cops on the campus, trained, ready to go. And
are they are they prepared and ready to be integrated into any plans you have? I mean, because are they on the same frequency, let's say?
Yes, yeah, literally and figuratively. We give them radios, so they are on the same frequency. But we have worked tabletop. We've trained with them. We've brought them down for training exercises, tabletop exercises, and we've also called them in. We just had Montgomery County down for a event that we had a couple weeks ago that we didn't know if, we just wanted to make sure we had some additional folks, and it works. We've practiced it enough that it runs very, very smoothly. And so, in fact, I would say seamlessly. And we've got Metropolitan Police, of course, always are there to help us. God bless Chief Conte. I'll call him up and he'll say to me, okay, he says, I could get 500 officers down there if you need them. And I'm thinking, I don't need 500, I might need, but it's just a great partnership. And while the National Guard is great, they're not cops. And sometimes what I need is just more police officers, especially if you're going to have folks that are trying to break the law and crossing over that line from a protest to, something that's criminal behavior.
So how does it legal? I was unaware that Congress had changed the law to give you authority to go ahead. So how does that work? I mean, you literally, does that make, in the event that you did want to call the DC National Guard, do you call the commanding officer and order them, or do you have the right to ask, or do you have the right to order?
Oh, I request. It's a request for assistance. But again, I have spoken with the folks that I will call. We've actually even practiced. We had a practice request for assistance when we drilled this to make sure that that I knew how to do it and they knew what to expect from me. And so we've got the system down. And I would basically, it'd be a request for assistance from them.
Right. So one of the things that people talk about when they think about what happened on January 6th was an intelligence failure. And so the question is how with the size of the department that you have, can you have the intelligence and the investigative services to literally take care of 435 members of Congress when they go back to their home districts? Are you responsible for protecting them when they're in their home district, or is it just when you're in DC, you're mine? When you're out in your own home, it's the local police. How do you coordinate with all the other police departments around the country when they go home? And how do you have the capacity to investigate and to process all these potential threats?
So we do, in fact, provide assistance. And depending on the threat, we may, in fact, actually go around the country to ensure someone's safety and security. But we also work very closely with local law enforcement agencies around the country. I had an instance where we had a threat against a congressman, and he was concerned actually because someone had shown up at his home in his home district, and he said, I don't know, if if the local police know how to handle these things and everything. So I called to the chief of police in his town and said, we've had these threats. Understand, that this is what's happened. We got a call from the congressman, and he told us about people showing up at his house. And I said, is this something that you can assist us with? And got a very good response. And the chief told me what he could do. And this was a fairly small police department of a little town, but he said, man, I can't put someone there 24 hours, 7 days a week. He says, but I can do this. And he told us the things that he could do. And it was terrific. I said, this is perfect. This is what we need. We provided that police department with all the information we had about the individual that we were concerned about. And they said, well, we can follow up. This person lives down, in our area, that we can follow up with this. So we often coordinate with local law enforcement, to ensure. And this has come about because of things like Gabby Gifford's shooting, and the shooting of Representative Scalise over in Alexandria, during when they were out practicing baseball. And so, these kinds of incidents have caused us to take more of an interest and more of a responsibility for the safety and security of all members, whether they're here in DC or whether they're traveling or whether they're at home.
So somebody just asked, how do you deal with members of Congress who are threatened by other members of Congress? And they were pointing to, and I was thinking about it, you're saying to me, Ron, I wish you would ask me that question. But I'm talking about the incident, what happened with the lady who heads the Congressional Black Caucus, and where this congressman poked at her, and she asked him, apparently according to news reports, to put on a mask, and she said to kiss my blank. And I mean, do you get involved when you hear about like kerfuffles or things like that happening between members of Congress?
We try not to with those kinds of things if it's just members, and thankfully the House Sergeant at Arms and the Senate Sergeant at Arms will often sort of try and referee those kinds of issues. We are not focused on investigating, and we don't investigate members of Congress. We don't investigate their staff, despite what some folks might tell you. We don't do that, and so we try and stay out of those. And this is, remember when I started talking, and I talked about the civil discourse and where we've gotten to in our country today. Well, we don't want to get involved in politics. That's the last thing I want, is to get involved in any. My folks do not care, and I certainly don't care if whether somebody's a Democrat or Republican. We provide the same service to everybody. We are equally committed to their safety and security. It doesn't matter to us what their political persuasion is.
In the last few days, there's been, Representative Troy Nell made those accusations. I saw the back and forth with you in the paper that his office was illegally searched by the Capitol Police. You stated that his office was open and that there was a police officer on patrol. Can you shed any light beyond what's beyond that, or is that under investigation? And no.
Well, I've asked for the Inspector General to come in. Look, I'm confident that my officer did the right thing. We do, there was nobody was under investigation. There was no unlawful entry to his office. My cops did the right thing, and they patrolled the halls of Congress, and this was on a weekend, a Saturday when no one was around, and officer finds an open door. They're supposed to go in and check to make sure everything's okay. And I spoke with the good congressman, and I tried to answer all his questions and gave him all the information I had, and I think he still is not convinced that we weren't trying to investigate him or something. And in fact, there's just no merit to that. We were not trying to investigate anybody. We were just making sure that no one had, broken into the office, or no one had gone in and disturbed anything. And but the Inspector General will look at it, and I'm sure that we'll come to the conclusion that my officers did the right thing.
Chief, this comes from Susan, who's a member of the board of the JCRC. Do you still feel that you're on higher alert, or what's the new normal?
Oh, that's
good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think we're on high alert, but we are. We certainly are not at a point where we think that we don't have to be absolutely vigilant all the time. And that's why I talk about the protests up in Canada that might end up here. I talk about the big events that we have, and all of a sudden somebody might decide, oh, we want to, we're going to do this at the Capitol. We have to be ready for anything, and better prepared for unexpected things that might happen. And so, to the extent that we are doing our best to anticipate unexpected things, I would say yes. We're on a mid-level alert, not a high alert, but we're certainly not at a place where we're thinking everything's quiet, no issues.
Those days are kind of over.
Maybe, yeah. Unfortunately, they may be, but and it's a shame. But we've got look. One thing I've learned as a result of January 6th, the public, and I learned this before the 6th, the public has very little patience for the government or any government agency to make mistakes. And so there's a lot of pressure on the U.S. Capitol Police to make sure we get it right from now on. And we're going to be tested again. There's no question we're going to be tested again. And we need to be ready, and we need to get it right, because we have to restore the confidence in the U.S. Capitol Police. And I think we're doing that. We're making some progress there. But I think, the next time that someone looks and sees us tested and sees how we react to that, that's going to allow us, I think, to go a long way to restore the confidence of folks in the United States Capitol Police.
One question, more parochial, that says there are many Jewish community institutions that are located near the Capitol complex that can be impacted by a national security event. How should they best work with the National Police? So
I just got we're working today with a Jewish institution that is on Capitol Hill. And one of the things that we're doing with the folks that live there, the churches, the synagogues, the businesses that are on Capitol Hill, adjacent to our complex, we are much more active on social media than we ever were. In fact, I don't think we were active on social media at all prior to the 6th. And so when something happens, we're putting information out to the community. The same, and we're on the same listservs as DC police, for that area, so that if they see, all of a sudden they see roads blocked off and they see, a bunch of cops, running somewhere, we'll put out information, say, hey, we've got a bomb threat. Just stay off Capitol property, or remain in your homes, or we'll give them some sort of advice, like if they really need to be, like if we say, hey, there's an individual that we're chasing that has a gun, obviously we would tell people, lock your houses, stay in your house. We're chasing a guy with a gun. But typically, it's something that we have contained, but we don't want people just sort of walking down saying, hey, what's going on? Because it might not be safe. Like the guy who had was threatening that he had the bomb. We certainly didn't want anybody to get close to this guy. So, but we're putting the information out to the community. So what they need, what one needs to do, including, the Jewish institutions that are in our area, is make sure they're signed up on our listserv, make sure they're, however this is where, I should know this, my kids would know how to say it better, but just that they're on our social media and check our social media, because that's where they get latest information. We do keep it updated.
Right. One person has asked, is the Capitol perimeter more secure since that people were obviously, the horrific images. I don't think I'm ever going to forget in my life, January 6th, just watching back for hours. I don't think any of us could do anything. I think Americans were just horrified watching this around the country. And they just saw people breaking into windows and being able to pierce barriers without getting into any operational details that you can't talk about. Is the Capitol more secure now?
So I can give you one word answer, yes. Unfortunately, I can't say much more than that. But it is, and just like the work that we're doing, the work continues. I don't think anybody's finished yet, but yes, is the answer to that question.
So I'm going to come back to one question, and then we can close it down, because I know you have another meeting, sir, and you also have to get up early. Again, if I'm one of the people from around the nation who is blessed to have this conversation with you tonight, and they're thinking, I want to do something. I want to help the police department. I want to show that I stand with the U.S. Capitol Police. I want to show that I understand what these men and women went through. I don't think any of us will ever forget the picture of that police officer having his head squeezed between a door. I don't know how you could not be human and not have anger and emotion for what happened that day, and almost felt like and the violation of our democracy. What can somebody do?
I think
messages of support, donations,
but messages of support to the members of Congress. They're the ones that control our budget. They're the ones that they're the people that we serve primarily. So if folks contacted their congressman, their senator, and said, we support the Capitol Police. We appreciate what the Capitol Police do every day. Because again, I think that a lot of folks and I certainly count myself among them, I didn't know everything that the Capitol Police did until I got this job. And then I was just blown away by all the responsibilities that we had, the profound responsibilities that we had. Think about this. And you just said it. Our country was horrified by what they saw. And I told my folks once, I told my senior staff, I said, we can never allow this to happen again. I don't think the American psyche could handle seeing something like this happen again. And so we now understand that the responsibility. I think right after January 6th, I think many of the leadership there understood just how important it was for us to never allow this to happen again. And so, the men and women of this department, sworn and civilian, are working so hard and really care about what they do, and they're serving their country in a very unique way. And so, I think if folks felt like they wanted to just show their appreciation, let your congressman, your senator know that you think the Capitol Police are, that you're proud of what the Capitol. What a better way to put it? Just that you appreciate the important work, the profoundly important work that the Capitol Police are doing every day.
Yeah, that third bullet you said is to make sure that the legislative process continues. When you think about what's more the cornerstone of American democracy than our legislative process doesn't continue, we're no longer a democracy.
Exactly.
So on that note, Chief, I just wanted to thank you for your passionate commitment and extraordinary professionalism to law enforcement, and for your incredible dedication to the safety and welfare of our nation and its leaders. And for your, we're blessed to have you continuing to devote yourself to this important profession. And we miss you in Montgomery County, but you're not that far away. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you all.